You can determine what market conditions in which they are most likely to participate, what conditions will confirm their beliefs about the future, and what will disappoint them. Once you learn their unique characteristics, you can anticipate how one or more groups are likely to act and determine how their activity will affect the balance of the market and the potential for price movement. Why do we trade? Every moment we exist, we are interacting with the environment, expressing ourselves in our own unique way, and thus creating our lives by the way we live it. Everything we do in every moment is some form of the way we express ourselves. We express ourselves to fulfill our needs, wants, desires, and goals. Today most individuals can channel their energies to fulfill needs beyond the requirements of food and shelter, but to do so requires money. Money allows for a system of exchange where we can trade the goods and services created from individuals expressing themselves in highly specialized ways. Money has evolved to become the object of our needs because it represents the means or path by which we can express ourselves as individuals. All behavior is a form of self-expression, and almost any way in which an individual wants to express himself in our society requires money. So at the most fundamental level of cultural existence, money represents freedom of expression. Individuals expressing themselves in specialized ways create a highly complex system of interdependency. To exchange goods and services, individuals have to agree on the value of those goods and services to make an exchange. I am defining value as the relative degree of importance or potential something has in fulfilling a need. The actual price at which goods and services are then exchanged will be determined by the fundamental economic law of supply and demand. In psychological terms, the law of supply and demand is founded in human fear and greed. Both fear and greed will compel people to act or not act depending on their needs in relation to the perceived external conditions. The price for goods and services will be determined by the individual's needs in relationship to their belief in their ability to fulfill those needs. Implied within that belief is their perception of the availability of the goods and services they need. Greed is founded in a belief in scarcity and insecurity. Both beliefs generate fear. I am defining greed as a belief that there will never be enough available to fulfill oneself in combination with a belief that one always needs more to feel secure or satisfied. The perception that these conditions exist either internally or externally will generate a fear that will compel one to act or not act, depending on who controls the supply. The behavior someone displays will be consistent with what they believe they must do to satisfy the deficit. If two or more people have the same fears, they will typically compete among one another for the existing supply. If the supply of something is limited in relationship to the need, those that are in need will compete for the available supply. They will compete by their willingness to exchange more resources, pay more money, than will someone else who may also be in need. If, however, the supply is great in relationship to the need, demand, there will be no fear of scarcity. Consequently, people will conserve their resources, money, by diverting them to other needs or just waiting for the possibility that the price may come down. Any system of interaction founded in individual fears of lack or scarcity will cause the price of goods and services to fluctuate in relationship to the relative degree of security or insecurity that is being experienced by the collective masses at any given moment. These fluctuating prices create economic risk for all those dependent on others to fulfill a need that they cannot fill themselves. What is risk? Risk is the possibility of a net loss of personal resources, energy, money, etc., in the exchange or pursuit of fulfilling a need. Fluctuating prices also create opportunities for those who are willing to assume the risk created by price movement. As long as there is disagreement between individuals about the value of goods and services, prices will fluctuate, thereby creating opportunities for traders to make money if they will assume the risks. Definition of trading. I define trading as two parties exchanging something of value to fulfill some need or goal. In the context of the stock or futures markets, participants trade for the sole purpose of accumulating wealth or protecting physical assets from deteriorating in value. In essence, all traders in these markets, whether they are labeled speculators or hedgers, trade to accumulate wealth. It is only a matter of perspective. For the hedger, the motivation to protect the value of an asset from economic risk is still to accumulate wealth. Hedgers will trade for a higher degree of economic certainty by transferring the risk created by changing prices to another willing trader. Typically, it will be the speculator on the other side of the trade willing to assume the risk of changing prices for the opportunity to accumulate wealth from those changes. For example, stock owners will sell their stock because they believe the possibilities for the future appreciation of the stock are either non-existent or minimal in relationship to their assessment of the risk to keeping it. They may also sell even with expectations of future appreciation if there is a need to liquidate to satisfy other needs. The buyers, the other side of the trade, believe that the stock will appreciate in value. We can assume that the buyer believes this because people trade to accumulate wealth. Since the goal of a trader is to satisfy a need to accumulate wealth, we can assume that people will not consciously enter into a trade believing they will lose or fail at satisfying their needs. Because all traders have basically the same goals, to win, we can then state that no two traders enter into a trade unless they have opposing beliefs about the future value of whatever is being traded. Keep in mind that the current price of anything is always a reflection of what someone is willing to pay and what someone is willing to sell for in that moment. So, although there must be agreement between two parties for a trade to exist at a price, inherent within the transaction is complete disagreement between buyer and seller on the future value of what they are trading. For example, would I be incorrect in stating that any stock owner will not sell his stock if he believed it had potential for future appreciation? When he sells, he has basically given up on the possibilities of future appreciation. Why did the buyer buy? To lose money? To be wrong? No, of course not. The buyer's belief in the future value of the stock is opposite that of the seller's. This disparity is illustrated even more clearly with futures trading. Of real interest is the academic community's belief that the markets are efficient, which assumes that traders have rational reasons for their behavior, knowing what they are doing and having a good reason for doing it. Academicians also believe that the markets are basically random, which seems to be a complete contradiction to a market that is supposed to be efficient. In fact, however, the market's behavior is mostly irrational. If you define rational as any action that is the result of a specific methodology or is planned in advance, and definitely not random, because irrational behavior is very predictable. If you want to learn to predict price movement, you don't need to pay attention to reasons. What you need to do is determine how the majority of traders perceive the external conditions in relationship to either their fear of scarcity, or their fear of missing out, or both. Chapter 8. The 3 stages to becoming a successful trader. Before we cover the 3 stages to becoming a successful trader, it would be a good idea to review some of the material already covered. In the market environment, you have to make the rules to the game and then have the discipline to abide by these rules, even though the market moves in ways that will constantly tempt you into believing you don't need to follow your rules this time. This movement allows you to indulge in any illusion or distortion that suits you in any given moment. Certainly you wouldn't choose to feel pain, confronting your illusions about the market, if there is any reasonable information that would support the possibility of your expectation being fulfilled. In an unlimited environment, if you can't confront the reality of a loss, then the possibility exists for you to lose everything, in each and every trade. If you believe trading is like gambling, it isn't. In any gambling game, you have to actively participate to lose and do nothing to stop losing. In the market environment, you have to actively participate to get into a trade and actively participate to end your losses. If you do nothing, the potential exists to lose everything you own. When you participate in gambling games, you know exactly what your risk is and the event always ends. With the markets, you don't ultimately know what your risk is, even if you are disciplined enough to use stops, because the market could gap through your stops. Also, because the event never ends and is in constant motion, there is always the possibility of getting back what you are losing in any trade. You won't need to actively participate to get back what you are losing. You just have to stay in your trade and let the market give it to you. As a result, there is the constant temptation not to cut your losses, which is very difficult to resist. Why choose pain over the possibility of being made whole, when all you need do is ignore the risk? You create your experience of the market. Each equilibrium, the current price, presents every trader with an opportunity to either buy low or sell high relative to the next change. Except for the time it takes to execute a trade, it is basically the same market for all of us. You are either able to perceive any given equilibrium as opportunity to execute a trade, or you can agonize over what you believe is a missed opportunity from the last price change, or you can refrain from taking the trade at the current price, even though you perceive it as an opportunity, because you fear the market might make you wrong. The market does not create the ways in which you perceive it. It merely reflects what is going on inside of you in any given moment. Whether you perceive the current market condition as an opportunity and didn't act on your perception, or didn't realize it was an opportunity until after the move occurred, is, again, a direct reflection of your unique psychological makeup. You attach the meaning to any particular move. From an objective perspective, the next tick up can be described as the price just moved 1 tick up from the previous price. That is a reality about that 1 tick price change we all share. However, to one trader, that 1 up tick could be the final defeat in a short position he had been carrying. To another trader, it could mean a perfect selling opportunity because the market just can't go higher. To a third trader, it could mean a buying opportunity because the market broke out of a resistance area, based on the way he defines resistance. The market neither chooses nor has any way of choosing the meaning you attach to any particular price change or market condition. For example, you could perceive an opportunity to sell high and act on that perception by entering the market with a short position. From the point you entered, let's say the market went in your favor and then violently reversed itself. In doing so, it very quickly went through your entry point and kept on going up with only a few rest periods and minor little retracements. Each rest or retracement could have been an opportunity to get out of your short position and reverse yourself. What would stop you? The answer is inside of you. If you breathed a sigh of relief each time the market paused or retraced a bit, choosing to believe it was finally all over, then I ask you, what is all over? Is it possibly the fact that you won't have to confront yourself and say I'm wrong? That again is inside of you. You choose, based on the makeup of your mental environment, to believe the pauses were stopping points, relief from confrontation, instead of a possibility to take advantage of an opportunity to eliminate your risk and a high probability to accumulate a profit by reversing yourself. The way the market seemed to you was actually the way you created it in your own mind. Out of all the available choices and alternate ways of considering the possibilities, you choose one particular way. Your own mental framework, controlling what and the ways in which you perceive information, locked you into that losing trade. The unique way you define a loss, your beliefs about it, and what it means to you is a component part of your psychological makeup. Your beliefs will interact with your perception of environmental information to form the particular way you pick and choose whatever information you happen to focus your attention on. The market has nothing to do with this process, even though that is where the information is coming from. In the trading environment, the outcome of your decisions is immediate, and you are powerless to change anything except your mind. The power you have to create more fulfilling outcomes from your trading resides in your degree of mental flexibility. You have to learn how to flow with the markets. You are either in harmony with them or you are not. The less acceptance you have for different types of market behavior, the more the market seems to turn on you like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. In one moment it is satisfying all your needs, in the next it is like a greedy monster taking everything away. This Dr. Jekyll/Mr. Hyde characteristic of the markets only represents your own mental inflexibility to flow with the changes and your lack of understanding, that you give yourself to the best of your ability what you end up with out of what is available. And by the same token, what you lost, you gave away. You can't change what the market is doing. You can only change yourself in a way that allows you to perceive what it may do next with increased clarity and objectivity. As a trader, you want to know what is going to happen next, yet, how can you begin to know what could happen next, if you refuse to open yourself up mentally in ways that allow you to perceive the most likely possibilities? It is a complete contradiction in thought to want to know what is going to happen next in an event over which you have no control and at the same time to maintain a rigid mental structure that allows for only a very limited number of possibilities. This contradiction in thought is the result of not understanding the nature of beliefs and how they limit a person's perception of environmental information. When you put on the trade, you had to have some belief about the future. What you need to do is learn how to release yourself from the demand your expectations be fulfilled exactly the way you expect them to be. Releasing yourself from the demand will allow you to shift your perspective to perceive whatever opportunities exist in the market now, as if you didn't have a trade on at all. All of us are in a position of having to pick and choose environmental information because we can't be aware of everything at once. If you pick and choose market information on the basis of having to justify your beliefs, you are putting yourself at an extreme disadvantage. You will be excluding from your awareness information that may be more indicative of the consistency of the market and its potential to move in any given direction. And it will be extremely difficult to learn how to develop a perspective for the big picture, by expanding your time frame perspective. So even though you can't actually control the market's movement, you can learn how to control your perception of the market's movement in a way that allows you the maximum objectivity. Learning to perceive objectively will increase your ability to let the market tell you when to get in and when to get out. You can learn how to trade where you won't be using information to justify your beliefs but rather to perceive the most likely possibilities in any given moment. As you build a solid foundation of insight and understanding into the workings of your mental environment, which I will present in chapters 9 through 14, you will learn how to change yourself in ways that will allow you to perceive the markets from an objective perspective and eventually trade intuitively. What I will be offering you in the remainder of the book is a step-by-step process of how to adapt yourself to function more effectively in the trading environment. Essentially, it is a process that will enable you to identify and manipulate your beliefs to be more consistent with your goals. There are two dominant themes that form the foundation for this approach. The first we have already briefly covered, that you create the market that you experience in your own mind based on your beliefs, perceptions, intents, and rules. And, second, Your trading results will be a function of the degree of skills you develop in three primary areas: perception, or your ability to perceive opportunity; execution, or your ability to execute a trade; and accumulation, or your ability to allow your account balance to grow over a period of time or series of trades. Perceiving opportunity. Your perception of opportunity is a function of the depth of insight into the market's behavior. The depth of your insight into the market's behavior is equivalent to the number of distinctions you can make and the quality of these distinctions. Perception of opportunity is synonymous with your expectation of what the market will do next. To be effective, you will need to learn how to make kinds of distinctions that will provide you with an indication of a high probability opportunity from an objective perspective, what I call making an uncommitted assessment of the probabilities. To be able to make some kind of quality distinctions that will eventually develop into a vision of the broader perspective, you will need to learn how to expand your time frame perspective of market activity. There are several components to this process, but the two most important are: 1. Instituting a completely disciplined trading approach, and 2. Learning how to release yourself from the negative emotional energy stored in the memories of any past trading experiences. The disciplined approach will naturally help you develop the degree of self-trust essential to function effectively in an environment that does not provide any external constraints to limit or control your behavior, as society does. Without the discipline, you will be at the mercy of your own unrestrained impulses and basically out of control. Consequently, without the self-trust that develops from the self-discipline, you will fear the unpredictability of your own behavior. At the same time, you will likely project this fear into the markets as being erratic and seemingly unpredictable, when it is your own behavior you fear the most. It would be ludicrous to think that you could understand the market's behavior to any degree greater than you understand your own behavior first. To grasp the fundamental nature of your own behavior, you will need to understand thoroughly all the effects fear has on your perception of environmental information. At the most fundamental level, fear will limit your awareness of market information that could clearly indicate those possibilities that are in your favor and those that are not. How could any deep level of insight into the market's behavior ever develop if you are constantly worried about what the market may do to you and cannot stay focused on the consistency and structure of the market itself? The market can't do anything to you if you trust yourself to act appropriately under any market condition. Learning this is the key to gaining the level of confidence every trader needs to be successful. In the larger perspective, fear will reduce the likelihood of you ever developing to the point of making the kinds of distinctions in market behavior where you acquire a vision of the big picture. When you understand how fear operates in your trading and have conquered it, you will be able to see how fear operates in the market as a whole and then be able to anticipate the group's reaction to certain kinds of information. If you did not start your trading career with the proper mental perspective or with a disciplined approach, then it is likely you have suffered some degree of psychological damage. I define psychological damage as any mental condition that has the potential of generating fear. The negative energy stored in these experiences, that create and support a belief about the threatening nature of the environment, will generate fear to the same extent as the degree of energy stored in the memory. By learning to release yourself from the pain, you will be reducing the fear and automatically opening yourself up to new awarenesses about the nature of the markets. You will be opening yourself up because fear will not be causing you to narrow your focus of attention. Instead of being focused on pain avoidance, you can be focused on what the markets are telling you. Learning how to release yourself from fear will also free you up to think of creative ways in which you can respond to the new relationships you are perceiving in the market's behavior. As a result, you will be increasing your confidence in your ability to respond appropriately to any given market situation. Executing your trades. Your ability to execute your trades is a function of the amount of fear you generate or the lack of it. Fear is always the result of your beliefs about the threatening nature of the environment. What could be threatening about the market? Nothing, if you had the confidence and completely trusted yourself to act appropriately under any given set of market conditions. Essentially, what you fear is not the markets but rather your inability to do what you need to do, when you need to do it, without hesitation. In your relationship with the markets you had to learn what to fear. What you learned to fear was a result of whatever you did that caused pain. Your pain was the result of your not knowing what to do next that resulted in an outcome you neither expected nor intended. In the market environment you are free to act or not to act. The markets cannot do anything to you that you don't allow, even if it is out of ignorance or a complete sense of powerlessness. The effects of fear on one's behavior are obvious, limiting one to the point of complete immobility. If you can't execute your trades properly, even when you perceive the most perfect opportunity, it is because you have not released yourself from the pain contained in the memories of past trading experiences and because you still don't trust yourself to act appropriately in any given set of conditions. If you did, there would be no fear or immobility. Accumulating profits. Your ability to accumulate profits either in a single trade or cumulatively with several trades over a period of time is a function of your degree of self-valuation. This sense of self-valuation is, in fact, the most important psychological component of success and will override all others in determining your results. Your degree of self-valuation will regulate how much money you will give yourself. The market doesn't give you the money, you give it to yourself based on your ability to perceive opportunity and execute a trade, out of the maximum potential available or perceivable at any given moment or time frame perspective, regardless of the depth of understanding you have of market behavior or what you consciously intend. You will only give yourself the amount of money that corresponds to your level of self-valuation. This concept can be explained with a simple illustration. If you perceive an opportunity, based on your definition or what market conditions constitute an opportunity, and do not follow through by executing a trade, what stopped you? In my mind, there can be only two possible reasons. You were either immobilized by the fear of failure or you are struggling with a belief, value, system that says you don't deserve the money. Otherwise, you would have acted on your perception. Self-acceptance. The second theme that provides a foundation for the belief system I am offering is that personal transformation, growth, and learning new skills are a function of self-acceptance. Your intent of learning a new skill or way of expressing yourself is in essence an attempt to create a new dimension of yourself. It is a goal you have projected out into the future that you will then attempt to fulfill by growing into it. The market will quite naturally make you face what is inside of you on a moment-to-moment basis. What is inside of you could be confidence or fear, a perception of opportunity or loss, restraint or uncontrollable greed, objectivity or illusion. The market just reflects these mental conditions, it does not create them. Therefore, to grow into a new expression of yourself, fulfill your goal of being a more successful trader, you will need to learn how to accept the existence of any of these negative mental conditions and the psychological components that create them. Cultivating a belief in accepting whatever you find inside of yourself will give you the base you need to work from to change these conditions. To illustrate this concept of self-acceptance, I will relate to you an example of a floor trader who came to me for assistance because he wanted to change his trading style. When he first went down to the floor, he got caught up in scalping because it seemed like the easiest way to make money. However, he soon found that trying to scalp for 1 or 2 ticks in the bond pit was just too physically exhausting because he had to compete with so many traders. So he decided that he needed to learn how to hang on to his trades for more than 1 or 2 ticks. The first thing we did was to pre-plan his trades. We used some fairly simple techniques to identify intraday support and resistance points within a 7 to 10 tick range. The plan was for him to stand in the pit and wait for the price to hit his target, buy support or sell resistance, execute the trade, wait for the market to hit his objective, and then exit the trade. If the market traded through his entry point in the opposite direction by more than 2 or 3 ticks, he was supposed to execute the loss without hesitation. Based on our assessment of the reliability of the support and resistance numbers, we believed he didn't need to risk more than 2 or 3 ticks to know if the trade was going to work or not. The first day that he tried to execute his plan, he did very well waiting for the market to hit his entry point. However, when it came time to execute the trade, he couldn't do it. He was supposed to buy at a support level, and he didn't do it because he thought it was going to keep on going lower. When the market didn't keep on going lower and bounced 2 and 3 ticks higher than what was his original entry point, he went ahead and bought 1 contract. From there he was supposed to wait until the market rotated back up to test the resistance, which was 10 ticks higher than his originally intended entry point, but now it was only 7 ticks away. Instead of waiting for the market to rotate to his objective, he got out of the trade as soon as he had a 2-tick profit. A short time later, when the market rotated up to the resistance area, he did the same thing that he did in the first trade. He didn't get in at his price because he thought the market was going to keep on going. It didn't, and he sold 3 ticks lower than he originally intended and then got out for a 1-tick profit, not waiting for a full rotation. When we talked about what he did later on that day, he was extremely displeased with himself. He made himself accountable, but he did not do what he was supposed to. He didn't get in at the price he intended or out where he intended, leaving several ticks on the table, so to speak. This is a very wealthy man who only had to risk 2 or 3 ticks at the most to find out if the trade was going to work and couldn't do it. By the same token, he was so desperate for a win that he couldn't wait for his profit objective, stating that he couldn't hang on because he has been burned too many times. Obviously, his backlog of negative experiences had nothing to do with the market's behavior or the probability of any particular strategy working or not. What was even more important, however, was his lack of acceptance for his current level of skill development. His intense anger over his performance clearly indicated that he could not accept where he was at or the results it produced. That first day was not a positive experience for him, even though he had his first winning day in a long time. His lack of self-acceptance certainly won't help him hang on to winning trades in the future. In fact, he will be digging himself into a deeper hole that he will eventually have to work his way out of if he wants to achieve the success he desires. As time went by, he became increasingly more confident with his ability to define an opportunity with a high probability of success. Almost every trade he put on would immediately go in his favor, so he would rarely find himself in a losing trade. But each day was also becoming ever more exasperating because he was still only holding on for a 1 or 2 tick profit and leaving several ticks on the table as the market rotated to test the next level of support or resistance. What was even more difficult for him to deal with was that many times he had bought the low or sold the high of the day. Of course, he didn't know at the time it was going to be the high or low of the day, but looking back, he just couldn't deal with the fact that he only got 1 or 2 ticks out of it. I knew the pressure was building inside of him because each day he had more excuses related to the market for why he wasn't doing what he was supposed to and had less and less tolerance to listen to anything I had to say about the situation. All these excuses were just an indication that he would not accept who he was in relationship to who he desperately wanted to believe that he already was. He was obviously indulging himself in illusion. To be the person he wanted to believe he already was would require that he learn how to be patient, acknowledge who he now was so he could concentrate on what he needs to learn and forgive himself for what he believed to be his past mistakes and inadequacies. However, this would be very difficult because being impatient with other people had always got him what he wanted as long as he was dealing with people who perceived themselves as weaker than he. So why should he have to learn how to be patient now? Besides, if he was patient with himself, it would make it difficult to justify his impatient, intolerant stance toward others who didn't learn fast enough or made mistakes. I didn't hear from him for a while and I just assumed that he wasn't doing anything different. Then one day after the close he called to tell me that he was going to start trading a 20 contract position. Otherwise nothing else about what he was doing had changed, except that he had several winning days in a row consisting of 1 and 2 tick winners. I knew he was setting himself up for a big losing day, although I didn't indicate this to him in our conversation. In his mental system he was reasoning that by trading a larger contract size he would make enough money to prove to himself and everyone else that he had finally arrived, that he was a successful trader and that he was not a person subject to deep-rooted fears. Not being one to stand in the way of progress, all I said was that I didn't think it was very prudent for him to be trading a 20 contract position, since he hadn't developed the psychological or mechanical skills to handle a position of that size. He grunted and hung up the phone. The next day he lost almost $3,000 trading 20 contract positions. He gave back to the markets all his profits, plus more, from all his successful efforts over the last 2.5 weeks of trading. At that point he was ready to listen to a plan on how he could learn how to be more accepting of himself and how to hang on to his winning trades. The following is another example of a trader who has learned self-acceptance. This trader works for a local brokerage firm, manages hedge positions for financial institutions, and also trades for his own account. I started working with him on a fairly regular basis about 3 years before the experience I am about to relate. He called me one day to tell me how proud he was of reversing his position on his last trade of the day. He said he cut his losses without hesitation and reversed his position from being short to going long. He was delighted that he felt no conflict, resistance, or mental anguish. He recognized what needed to be done and he did it. However, shortly after he did his reversal, one of the floor traders, who worked for the same firm filling customer orders, called him from the floor with some friendly advice that he should get out of his long position. Now, my client had resolved long ago that he would not place any significance on another trader's perception of the market. He had excellent knowledge of the markets and believed he could trust his ability completely to define opportunity and make assessments of the potential for the market to move. At least he thought he believed he trusted himself. After he got the phone call, he knowingly allowed himself to be influenced by what this floor trader had to say and exited his position. Within 10 minutes of doing so the market, bond, rallied 15 ticks, just about what my client originally thought it had the potential to do when he put the position on. He left 15 ticks on the table because he let another trader influence his perception of the market. However, he did not view this experience as a missed opportunity. He viewed it as an example of how he hadn't, as of yet, completely released himself from other people's opinions of the market. He didn't miss an opportunity because given the environmental conditions he was working under, someone calling him was an environmental condition he had no control over other than not to place any significance on the information. He simply was not psychologically prepared to take advantage of the opportunity. If he had been psychologically prepared, he would have stayed with his original plan, realizing that someone else's perception of the market isn't going to be any more objective than his. Furthermore, considering the skills he had already developed, their objectivity would usually be a lot less. As you cultivate a stronger belief in self-acceptance, you will then realize how the market reflects back to you your level of skill development along with the information that will indicate what you need to work on to become ever more successful. Each moment will then become a perfect indication of your skills and your degree of self-valuation, giving you a solid base from which to improve and learn. You will eventually understand at a very practical level how you are always doing the best you can because your outcomes will be the result of your depth of insight into the nature of the market environment and your ability to act on whatever you perceive. There won't be any reason not to accept these results as you increase your understanding of how to adapt yourself to suit any particular set of environmental conditions and realize the power inherent within this understanding. If you were to deny this perfection of the moment, a lack of self-acceptance, you would, in effect, be denying yourself the kind of information you need to grow into the skills you are attempting to learn. You can't grow or expand if you are denying the existence of environmental information that would clearly indicate your level of development. Nor can you acquire effective skills when you try to build from a base of illusion about the nature of the environment and yourself. If you won't acknowledge your true starting point, you cannot take the next most appropriate step in the development of any skill you intend to learn. The most essential component in the process of transformation is learning how to recognize and then clear out beliefs that argue for the status quo, beliefs that defend against the intrusion of environmental information you refuse to consider, and learning how to read the environment in a way that will clearly point to the most appropriate path to fulfilling yourself. Part 3. Building a framework for understanding ourselves. At the start of this book, I said it would be a step-by-step guide in the process of adapting yourself to the trading environment. The first step in this process of adaptation is recognizing the need to adapt. If you can't manipulate or force the markets to change in a way that suits your needs, then you will need to learn how to change yourself to suit the conditions. The market places no limits or constraints on the ways in which you choose to express yourself. In that respect, unlike in the cultural environment, you have all the power. The primary purpose of Part 2, the nature of the trading environment from a psychological perspective, was to point out some of the vast differences between the trading environment and the social environment we were taught to function in and to demonstrate clearly a need for a new perspective. The next two steps in this process are to learn how to 1. Identify exactly what changes you need to make to function successfully in the trading environment and 2. How to effect any mental changes that are necessary. Manipulating the physical environment is as easy as moving a chair from one place to another because that's where you want or need to sit. However, to consciously change yourself to function more effectively in a market environment that will not respond to your attempts to manipulate it will require a thorough understanding of the nature and functioning of your mental environment. The types of changes you will need to make will fall into two broad categories. First, you will need to learn some sophisticated mental skills to adapt yourself more readily to the constant changes with which the market confronts you, which will require neutralizing some commonly held cultural beliefs about success. These are the beliefs that have the potential to distort market information. Second, you will likely need to undo any psychological injury you may have sustained from your previous trading activity. Any psychological injury diminishes your capacity to execute your trades properly. There are obviously a multitude of sub-steps to learn how to identify what you need to learn, what you need to change, and how to make those changes. The 6 chapters in this part are organized to take you through this process of adaptation by providing you with the insight you will need to understand what you have to do and why. The first thing you will need is a structural framework to make the things that go on in your mental environment more tangible and concrete. To give you this framework, I will describe, define, and organize the component parts of the mental environment into a manageable context to where you can 1. Understand your behavior, 2. Learn the various techniques for manipulating your mental environment at your conscious direction to be more consistent with the environmental conditions and your goals, and 3. Learn how to monitor your relationship with the exterior environment. It is essential that you learn how to monitor your relationship between the interior and exterior environment because our goals, intents, expectations, needs, and wants are all component parts of our mental environment that we project out into the physical environment for fulfillment in some future moment. In other words, they are all components of the mental environment that either happen or don't happen in the outside physical world. You need to be able to recognize immediately, especially as a trader, when you have the potential to distort the outside information to be consistent with the inner components. These distortions will inevitably result in pain and psychological injury. What I intend to demonstrate in the following chapters is even though you cannot turn your eyes inward to actually see these mental component parts of the mental environment, it doesn't make them any less real. Besides, it isn't necessary to turn our eyes inward because we can just as easily learn to define what is inside of our mental environment by what we see and experience in the outside physical environment. By making the connection between what we believe and what we experience, it will be a lot easier to change what we experience by learning how to manipulate our beliefs. We will examine the nature of beliefs and how they act as environmental information management systems. I will demonstrate how our individual beliefs about the nature of the market, and our expectations of what it will do next, manage and control the type and quality of information we perceive about it. By breaking down the dynamics of perception, you will be able to identify the various ways in which all of us place mental limitations on the market's behavior and how these limitations cause us to distort market information. We will thoroughly explore the nature of fear and how it compels all of us to act without a perception of choice. The predominant underlying force behind most traders' actions causing prices to move is fear. The fear of missing out, competing for the supply, and the fear of loss. If you really want to understand the market's behavior to anticipate what it will do next, then you will first have to learn about and understand the underlying forces beneath your own behavior and how you process and manage information. When you understand how any number of typical market-related fears operate in your life and learn to release yourself from them, you will, in effect, be separating yourself from the crowd. When you separate yourself from the crowd and expand what you know about the forces affecting your behavior to encompass the group, it will be much easier to anticipate what the group will do because they will merely represent a larger, collective, version of the way you used to be. In other words, you will know how other traders will behave before they do because you will be able to observe them from a detached perspective, due to your having evolved beyond the choiceless state of operating out of fear. As you gain in your understanding of how beliefs interact with environmental information to control your perception and form your experience, along with learning how to distinguish between wishful thinking and what the market is indicating about itself, you will eventually be able to learn how to control your perception of the market activity in a way that allows you the greatest amount of mental flexibility, where you will be able to shift your perspective to flow with the markets and execute your trades without hesitation. If you can't change or control what the market is doing, then the only option you have left is to control yourself in a way that allows you to perceive what the market may do next with increased clarity and objectivity, requiring a thorough working knowledge of the nature of your inner environment in relationship to the outer physical environment. Chapter 9. Understanding the nature of the mental environment. Understanding yourself and learning how to function inside your mental environment is not as difficult as you may think it is. It does, however, require that you gain a thorough understanding of the general characteristics of the mental environment, its component parts, and how they work, which is exactly what this part of the book is designed to give you. The only reason why any of this would seem so difficult is because we aren't taught how to do it when we are young. In fact, we are usually taught exactly the opposite, that the mental environment is a mysterious place that can't be understood. As a result, we end up defining mental components in a haphazard fashion without ever really understanding the relationship between the components, or the relationship these components have with the outside physical environment and the ways that determine how we experience our lives. So, if you are going to consciously transform or adapt yourself to function more effectively as a trader, you will need a very fundamental and practical understanding of the nature of these mental components and how they operate. As will be explained in a moment, there are vast differences in the characteristics of the mental environment, inner, and physical environment, outer, in which our bodies occupy space. Understanding these differences is a key ingredient in the process of changing yourself. As a simple example, the book you are reading exists on the outside of you, whereas the label of book, i.e., your mind's perception of the book, or any other thoughts or sensations you would experience as a result of that label and the meaning you attach is all occurring on the inside of you. Anything that goes on or that happens on the inside of you would constitute your mental environment. All your experiences and memories of those experiences, all your beliefs, all the emotional energy attached to those beliefs, all your feelings, needs, wants, expectations, and goals, and all your thoughts, regardless of whether or not you have expressed these thoughts into the environment, make up your mental landscape. However, before we explore the differences between the inner and outer environments, I want to point out one characteristic common to the two. They are both constructed of many independently functioning parts. Regions would be a better word to describe the inner environment, that cooperate to make up the whole. Most people are very familiar with their body parts, even the ones enclosed within the body cavity. These parts are made up of cells that have distinct functions. They operate independently and cooperate with the other body parts. The sum total of these cooperating parts is our body. A simple illustration would be that eyes are not ears or lungs, they are distinct parts having unique functions within the whole. By the same token, the mental environment is composed of a number of cooperative but independently functioning regions that make up the whole of who we are. For example, a belief is not a dream, nor is a thought an emotion. Beliefs, dreams, thoughts, and emotions are all separate parts of the mental environment that interact in the same manner, at least conceptually, that your hands will interact with your eyes or your finger with your nose or your lungs with your heart. I am pointing this out because most people do not think of their mental environments in such specific ways with highly refined distinctions among the various regions and the ways the components within those regions function. The following list provides some of the categories into which I have divided the mental environment and the components associated with each category that will be explained in the next 5 chapters. Positively charged emotions: love, happiness, joy, confidence, peace, acceptance. Negatively charged emotions: fear, anger, hatred, jealousy, disappointment, confusion, impatience, stress, anxiety, betrayal. Illusions, denials, rationalizations, intellectualizations, distortions. Beliefs: intents, goals, aspirations, expectations, wants, desires, demands, needs. Dreams, sleeping dreams, daydreams. Thoughts, attractions, memories, creativity, intuition. This is not intended to represent a complete list of components and categories of the mental environment. However, it is comprehensive enough to serve the objectives of this book, which is to give you enough of a working knowledge of how they operate and interact to effect any changes you determine are necessary to trade successfully. What exactly is the mental, inner, environment? I am defining the mental environment as a place where all the sensory information from the physical environment, sensory information being the way in which the physical environment acts as a force on our eyes, ears, nose, taste, and touch, gets sorted, categorized, labeled, organized, associated with, and stored. Beliefs are formed and meanings get attached. The mental environment is where our experiences of the outside world form into a complex belief structure about the nature of the physical environment and our relationship with it. There are 2 things that I want you to note about this definition. First, it is limited, because it doesn't take into account mental activities that generate from within, exclusive of outside sensory information. This is something I will expand on later. Second, I am not including the brain as part of the mental environment, even though the activity of the mental environment takes place inside of the brain. Why I am not including it will become clear in a moment. One of the first characteristics you may notice about the mental components listed is that they are all intangible. You can't see, hear, touch, taste, or smell them, at least not as they exist in the mental environment. For example, no surgeon operating on living brain tissue has ever encountered his patient's beliefs, thoughts, dreams, or memories, even though he knew they were in there somewhere. Biochemists have discovered DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, while working at the molecular level of tissue makeup and as of yet have not encountered one of the mental components listed earlier. Yet we know they exist because we can experience the results of someone's beliefs or thoughts as they are expressed outwardly in the physical environment through their behavior. Now, for those of you who are asking yourself how do these mental components exist if they aren't tangible and no one has ever directly experienced them? The answer is, they exist as a form of energy, and energy doesn't have mass. For example, light will pass through physical objects or reflect off them, but light will not displace anything, and electricity will pass through objects, not displace them. Entities made up of atoms and molecules will displace one another as they move into each other's space. For a long time the scientific community believed that the atom was the smallest, most fundamental building block of existence, only to discover later that within an atom is energy. What scientists haven't figured out yet is how does something that exists without mass, the energy within the atom, become something that does have mass, the atom. In other words, how does energy go from being non-physical to physical? Albert Einstein was once asked to give his definition of matter and he said matter is merely energy in a form that we can perceive by our senses. Even at the atomic level, the book you are now reading and the chair you are sitting on to read it appear to your senses as if they are solid. However, that is not the case at all. Our senses cannot perceive things as they exist at the atomic level where everything is spinning and there is space between the atoms. However, the point I am making is that all matter exists as energy at the very deepest level of existence, within the atom, but not all energy exists as matter, as with light and electricity. In very general terms, mental energy, as it exists in its various, intangible forms as beliefs, feelings, emotions, and so on has the potential to act as a force on our behavior and consequently as a force on the outside physical environment corresponding to the way in which this energy is expressed. For example, mental energy in the form of a belief or memory of an experience can motivate a person to walk across a room to change the channel on his television set because he believes a program on another channel is more worthwhile or pleasurable, bid the price of a stock higher than the last price because he believes it serves his best interests, or motivate masses of people to go to war to defend or promote whatever they believe needs to be defended or promoted. These actions and their effects on the environment are the result of this mental energy expressed outwardly. What is experience? The world with our 5 physical senses. This is common knowledge. But, when you get down to the very basics, what actually happens to our experiences of the environment as they go from the outer, physical, to the inner, mental, environment? What we see, hear, touch, taste, and smell at a physical level is transformed into electrical impulses of energy and is sent to the brain via the nervous system. That is, at the most basic level, tangible experience of the outside world is transformed into intangible electrical energy, meaning that the tangible medium where we experience our lives, the physical environment, does not have the same characteristics and properties of the medium that represents and stores these experiences on the inside of us, the mental environment. We will examine these differences on a more practical level in a moment. If, at first, it seems preposterous to think that our experiences, environmental information, are transformed into electrical energy, then consider that we have been using an analogous form of technology mechanically for years in the form of telephones and computers. Computers store information, sounds, and images in a number of different energy media. Telephones transport sounds and images in the form of electricity, light, or microwaves. As commonplace as all this is, there is still something fascinating about a living process that transforms sensory information, tangible experience, into electricity and stores it that way. Everything that we have learned, as individuals, about the nature of our existence is stored in our mental environment at an intangible level. In a non-physical reality, energy is real, yet it is non-physical because it doesn't consist of atoms and molecules. Thus it can be said that energy exists in a non-physical reality. Earlier, I did not include the brain as part of the mental environment because it exists at the tangible level of atoms and molecules, physical reality, whereas the mental environment, energy in the form of beliefs, memories, emotions, and so on, about the nature of physical environment resulting from our experiences, does not exist at this tangible level. To help you understand this distinction between the brain and the mental environment, consider that the brain exclusive of the mental environment is no different from a computer that is not plugged into some electrical power source. In this analogy, the mental environment would correspond to the electrical energy that makes the computer run as well as store and carry the various forms of information the computer is designed to handle, and the computer hardware, physical, mechanical, atoms, and molecules, would correspond to the brain. This is the reason why I stated in the beginning of the chapter that there are vast differences between the mental and physical environments. All the mental components I listed exist at the intangible level of energy and, more important, function with the same properties and characteristics of energy. To understand the nature of the mental environment, you need to understand the characteristics of energy. Thus, what I intend to do next is examine the properties and characteristics of typical energy forms like light and electricity and then compare them to the characteristics of the mental environment to establish a correspondence between the two. Finally, in the next 5 chapters I will tie all this material together to give you some very practical techniques to improve your ability to trade effectively. How does the mental environment correspond to the characteristics and properties of energy? Energy is non-dimensional. As we already know, energy doesn't take up space in the physical environment because it doesn't displace anything that does take up space. This no-space characteristic of energy gives it a non-dimensional quality. In other words, anything that doesn't take up space also won't have any tangible dimensions of height, length, width, or circumference, at least not in the ways in which we would normally think of these properties. This non-dimensional quality is probably the hardest concept to grasp about the nature of energy, because even though energy is non-dimensional, it can take some form that is visible to our eyes, and anything that is visible should have dimensions that we can measure. It may seem like an obvious contradiction to say that energy can take a visible form and yet still not have dimension, but it is not. The best example to illustrate this is with holograms or holographic photography. With a holographic process you can create a 3-dimensional image in light projected into space that can be seen with the eyes, and it will appear to have length, width, and circumference. You could even measure the length or width of the image. However, your hands would pass right through the image if you tried, because there really isn't anything there, at least not in a physical sense. Images in light have no physical substance, so from a physical perspective, they also don't have any dimension. Relative to physical objects, energy doesn't have dimension. Memories or mental images, anything that we can see with our inner eye, like visualizations, daydreams, or night dreams, could operate very much like a hologram of laser light, an image of light that has no physical substance, where space as it relates to distance or dimension is not a consideration. The total area available inside of our skulls is quite small, especially in relationship to what will fit from a mental perspective. We can create mental images of any size or proportion, with none of the dimensional limitations that exist in the physical environment because these images, as an energy form, have no physical substance and thus exist in a state of form without dimension, taking up no space. You can easily demonstrate this concept with a simple mental exercise. Close your eyes and picture the last place where you went on a vacation. Where did you stay? What side trips did you take? When you imagined where you went, did you get up and move from your present location in the physical environment? Did you imagine yourself getting up out of your chair to make all the preparations that would be necessary for such a trip? Did you get in your car and mentally drive each mile to your destination, as you would if you were actually going? Probably not. The image of your last vacation most likely just popped into your consciousness. It is as if you were instantaneously transported to these locations, without regard to the space or distance that you would need to travel to get there in the physical environment. There was no space between your present location and the image of the vacation spot you hold in your memories. The nature of our dreams also illustrates this non-dimensional characteristic. First, there is no known limit to the type of dream landscape we could find ourselves in. Dreams can be as varied and diverse, if not more so, as the physical environment and all much larger than the space available inside of our skull cavity. Furthermore, in our dreams we can instantaneously change locations without actually traveling any distance. For example, you could dream that you were in the basement of your house and then in the next instant be in your living room, without actually having walked up your basement stairs or through other rooms to get to there. Speed. The second characteristic the mental environment shares with energy is speed. Energy travels at an incredibly high rate of speed. Light, for example, travels at a rate of 186,000 miles per second, fast enough to travel around the Earth approximately 8 times in 1 second. This is so fast that to our physical senses, it appears instantaneous or simultaneous. What I mean is, it moves so fast that our physical senses cannot detect the motion. Obviously, we can see the light, but we cannot actually see it moving from any given source to some distant point. For example, when you turn on a light in a dark room, does the room become illuminated in stages as the light travels from its source to the walls? No. To our eyes the room fills with light instantaneously, seeming to be everywhere at once, in a flash. Our eyes are not constructed in a manner where we can make any distinctions in movement, so it seems as if it doesn't move at all. This instantaneous characteristic of light relates quite well to the mental environment. As I pointed out earlier, dream travel can be and usually is instantaneous. While you're having a dream, in one instant you could be in a house and the next you could be on the other side of the world. There really isn't any travel time between these dream locations. Whatever mental mechanism prompts the change, it creates a simultaneous transfer, probably taking as much physical clock time as it does for light to fill up a dark room. However, there is another mental characteristic, actually more of a phenomenon, that best illustrates the speed at which the mental environment operates. This is something that is not experienced by very many people, but nevertheless reported by enough people in completely separate, unrelated incidents to confirm its validity. What I am referring to is the phenomenon of having one's life flash before one's consciousness in the form of a continuous mental image, from birth to the present. Something like this usually only happens in extreme life-threatening situations where the person believes that he is only moments from death. In those few moments before the expected death, the sights, sounds, tastes, smells, feelings, and emotions of one's entire life are re-experienced. Personally, whenever I've read of or heard someone's recounting of such an experience, it baffled me. I didn't understand how a person's whole life could scroll before his consciousness in a matter of moments, when it took years to experience. However, after a great deal of contemplation, it occurred to me that the energy in which our experiences are stored moves at speeds that are so incredibly fast that it would make our lives seem quite short in comparison, thus making it possible for all our experiences to scroll by in moments, regardless of how long it took actually to have the experiences. All this might be a little easier to understand if you imagine, as I did, experiences stored in a stream of light very much like what you would see when you look at a distant star. There is a very good correlation here. For example, scientists tell us that many of the closest stars to the Earth, other than our Sun, are so far away that even at the incredible speed of 186,000 miles per second, it still takes the light emanating from these stars hundreds of years to reach the Earth. This distance between the stars and Earth is so vast that it creates a steady beam of light, billions of trillions of miles long. So, when we look at any star other than our Sun, what we are actually seeing is the light that left it hundreds or even thousands of years ago. Thus what we are seeing is light from the star's distant past. Now, if we could travel along this beam of light back to its source, what we would be seeing is light from the star's more recent past, or future from the perspective of traveling toward the star, the closer that we got to it, until we arrived at the star's present. Light from the past, future, depending on one's perspective, and present would exist simultaneously within that beam. Now, imagine the sights, sounds, tastes, smells, feelings, and emotions of our experiences stored in energy as a stream of memories that we can travel along, very much like this beam of light, where we can use our consciousness to roam between the distant past to the more recent past up to the present moment, or project these memories out into the future. If the energy in which our experiences are stored can move at speeds that are equal to or approach the speed of light, then it would offer a credible explanation as to how it is possible for one's whole life to scroll before one's consciousness in a matter of moments. To illustrate this for yourself further, imagine all your experiences stretched out like a beam of light that you could travel along at the speed of light. At that speed, at even a couple of seconds of travel time, you could get through a great deal of information. For example, if we just arbitrarily decided that it took 10,000 miles of mental energy stretched out to hold 1 year's worth of experience, then, at the speed of light, you could get through almost 19 years of memories in 1 second. Recognition of this phenomenon helps us to grasp one of the most difficult concepts about the nature of the mental environment, that it exists outside of time, as we know it. That is, our physical senses lock us into perceiving an environment bounded by the limitations of time and three-dimensional space. We have to experience each moment in a linear sequence. We can't go backward and experience the past as it existed in the physical environment. Once it passes, it's gone forever. Nor can we move ahead into the future. The past doesn't exist anymore, and the future doesn't exist yet. What does exist are these seemingly endless sequences of now moments in which we experience our lives. However, the mental energy our inner components consist of operates outside of our normal concept of time and space as it is experienced in the physical environment. In the mental environment there are no spatial boundaries or time constraints. We can think in any direction we please, past, present, or future. And, theoretically, there would be no limits or boundaries as to how much information could be stored. Simply stated, time is a function of our perception of movement over distance or three-dimensional space. In other words, to perceive time, you need two key components: space that has dimensions, and movement. Both these properties obviously exist in the physical environment. It has characteristics of three-dimensional space consisting of length, height, width or thickness, and circumference. Also, the physical environment is in constant motion. The sun, other stars, the planets, and their moons are all in motion. And even though we can't directly perceive it, everything physical is in motion at the atomic and molecular level. Everything is spinning around something larger, from the tiniest atoms and molecules to the largest stars and solar systems, including the atoms and molecules in our own bodies. This spinning motion of the Earth and its orbit around the Sun acts as a force on the environment, changing day to night and night to day, creating the weather and the seasons, as well as an endless number of other environmental cycles. All these cycles of environmental changes, including our own bodily cycles of growth, age, respiration, digestion, and so on, resulting from the movement of the atoms and molecules of our cells, act as a force on our physical senses, causing us to experience a constantly changing environment, one cycle after another, in straight linear fashion, thus giving us our perception of time that is always moving forward. If we couldn't perceive motion or some sort of movement over three-dimensional space to act as reference points to measure this movement, then we wouldn't be able to perceive the passing of time. For example, if we were conscious but somehow fixed in a state of suspended animation where we had no sensory input, no perception of movement of any kind, not even a heartbeat, it would be impossible to tell the difference between a few seconds or a few days. To measure time, you need a point to start from and a point to get to. These points can be measured off in distance or time, but you need three-dimensional space to get your points. We think in an environment that is more like a stream where our consciousness can roam freely between the past, present, and future without regard to time or space. Furthermore, The actual sequences of moments that exist in the physical environment have no effect on the energy our memories are stored in. Sequences of time only have an effect on the mental environment relative to the impact the environment is having on our senses in energy terms. You can easily demonstrate this to yourself by trying to reconstruct from your memory the last 24 hours, moment for moment. Difficult, isn't it? Now try to do it for a week ago today. The only things we remember are the significant events, the experiences that had the most impact on our senses, the ones with the most energy connected with them. That's because experiences are not recorded in our memories as moments of time. They are stored as charges of energy, and as such they have no relationship to the passing of physical clock time. Remember, energy doesn't exist as atoms and molecules, and therefore relative to our perception of the passing of time, it is not subjected to this non-stop spinning of everything that is physical. Energy can remain static or be active. For example, someone or something could remind you of an experience that happened 20 years ago, an experience that you haven't thought of since it happened. When you tap into the energy of those memories, you will re-experience the sights, sounds, tastes, smells, and most important, the emotions of that time, as if nothing had changed. In your mind, nothing has changed. The energy remained dormant for 20 years. It becomes active either when we choose to think or reflect about what is inside of us, or when we are inadvertently reminded of what is inside of us. Significantly positive, pleasurable, happy, joyful, etc., or negative, painful, terrorizing, angry, hateful, experiences are easily recalled because of the amount or intensity of the energy involved with the event. These types of experiences will pop into our conscious recollection, at will. But, try to remember every time in your life that you brushed your teeth, took a drink of water, opened your refrigerator door, or put your shoes and socks on, and it's not so easy. These events are difficult to recall because there is very little energy connected with each of these types of experiences. Our memories are like pockets of energy that we may organize chronologically by date and time, as in the stream of light example. However, all the uneventful moments between the eventful moments seem to disappear without a trace or get compressed as if they never happened, even though we know that they did. We must have put on our shoes and socks a month ago today because we probably would remember walking around without them. That might be significant enough to remember. What we read, as an example, is usually quickly forgotten because there is very little impact the environment is having on our senses. Printed words on a page have very little visual impact in relationship to activities of a more experiential nature. For example, actually participating in a biology experiment will have a much greater impact from an energy perspective than will reading about one. The energy required to remember something that we read has to be generated from within in the form of concentration. So, the way in which we experience clock time is in relationship to what we are feeling, either physical or emotional impact, in any given moment. If, for example, you were experiencing terror, each second of clock time could easily seem like an hour or day. Each moment of a terrorizing experience seems to last forever because the environment is assaulting our senses. The impact is so painful that we can't wait for the experience to end to be out of that situation. We would therefore focus our attention on how long the event is lasting, while we were waiting for it to end, thus slowing down our sense of time. Pleasurable experiences seem to fly by. We have no concept of time passing, because we are in a state of joy and happiness, and nothing takes us out of these moments to feel something less than the joy. We come out of that state of mind when the experience starts to diminish in its degree of happiness, causing us to focus more on the unpleasantness of what we are experiencing, some degree less than joy, even if it is boredom, compared to the happiness we are feeling. When our focus shifts from joy, no concept of time passing, to I can't wait for this to end, our sense of time slows down in proportion to the unpleasantness of the experience. In the physical environment, experiences take place in moments of time that pass one after another, in linear fashion. What we experience in moments of time, through our physical senses, is transformed into electrical energy and stored as a memory relative to the degree of impact of the experience. Memories don't have any restrictions imposed on them by time because energy isn't physical. Time is one-directional, whereas in our mental environment we are free to think about our memories at will or by just wanting to. We can experience them as a mental image,